Today on the Nigerian Community Chronicle Podcast, we are honored to welcome a true cultural force in the world of music, storytelling, and performance, Juwon Ogungbe. Juwon is a distinguished opera singer and composer whose artistry spans far beyond classical music. A visionary performer across genres, he has composed for major institutions such as the BBC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and the Southbank Centre, leaving an indelible mark on the UK's creative landscape. His operatic works have been nurtured and developed by organizations like Opera North, the Grimeborn Opera Festival at the Aquila Theatre, and the Dhow Countries Music Academy in Zanzibar. His celebrated music theatre piece, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, premiered in 2019, and he continued to captivate audiences with new works even during the challenges of 2020. Beyond the stage, Juwon is a prolific creator with several music releases available on his Bandcamp page at juwonogungbe.bandcamp.com. A powerful book titled All Roads Lead to Peace, available on Amazon, and an enchanting audiobook for bedtime stories for children, Whisper in Your Ear, available on Audible. He also hosts a thought-provoking weekly podcast series called Multiverse, which you can tune into on Spotify, where he explores ideas, perspectives, and stories that transcend borders and genres. As a proud member of the Nigerian diaspora, Juwon continues to champion cultural heritage, creativity, and inclusion, values that align closely with the mission of NACAD, the Nigerian Arts, Culture, and Advocacy Initiatives in the diaspora. We are absolutely thrilled to have him here with us today to share his journey, reflections, and vision for the future. Welcome to the podcast, Juwon.
Thank you, Femi, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. Once again, Juwon, we are honored to have you on the podcast. Could you start by telling us a bit about your musical roots and what inspired your journey into opera and composition?
Okay, that's a very long story, but always musical right from early childhood, and always was attracted to performance and creating for performance and that sort of thing. From my early days in London to going to Nigeria, living there, and at school and in university in Nigeria, through all of those times. And while I was at school and university in Nigeria, oddly enough, that was where I first came into contact a lot, say, with classical singing and that sort of thing. So at the time it was more like the context of like maybe just like singing choral music or occasionally singing solo things. And then when I got to university, I met one or two people that had ambitions to become classical singers, and that in some way kind of inspired me, but I didn't immediately go into that. I returned to the UK and pursued my career as a musician, singer, composer, various things. And it was maybe in my late 20s when, I had a singing teacher, and like the singing teacher was very, very supportive of me. It was more than a teacher, almost like a surrogate parent. And she came to some of the performances of pieces that I had created, like music theatre pieces and other things. I mean, lots of work that I created. She was a very kind of gregarious person. And she saw my work and heard it and said, "You should sing opera." And that was, and then she sent me to an opera training group. And that was where my journey with opera, as in actually performing in operas, began.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, your career spans many genres and platforms, from composing for the BBC and the Royal Shakespeare Company to performing at the Southbank Centre. What were some pivotal moments that shaped your path, as a composer and a performer?
Oh, wow. Again, that's shaped. So that's as in like things that what inspired me to do. Is that what you mean?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, because the whole idea is for us to be able to inspire, younger generations, inspire our community in diaspora so that they can learn from you. And then if any of them feel like taking a lead, from you, they'll be able to, how to, to weather that storm.
I could always hear tunes in my head. I could always hear music in my head right from childhood. So apart from like singing and performing, I could always hear melodies, tune, musical ideas before I was even capable of playing an instrument or anything like that. It was all, so you could say it's a gift.
Right.
So that was already part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And another part of it, that my sister, for example, said, oh, I mean, like, this was in adult life now. My sister said, you should be in theatre, you should be an actor, you should be this, or you should do that, you should do these things. Because when we were children, you always, made us perform these stories. You always put these things together, us, rehearsed us, put us together in situations and made us perform somehow. And that it was just something you did naturally from childhood. So I think these attributes were always just part of who I am.
Right.
And so I gravitated towards them wherever I got the opportunity to do them. So more than to say that there was any specific moment where there was a light bulb that went off in my head as such, I think it was always something that I was born to do it, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. That's very interesting. You it's just mentioned now that you play instruments. Can you just share with us what kind of instruments do you play?
Well, I suppose my main instrument is a piano.
Right.
That's the one that I play the most. The one that people identify me for, apart from singing.
Right.
And but then, of course, through the years, I have acquired some skills in other instruments to an extent. But then it's like different levels of like ability. So, for example, I wouldn't go on a concert stage, a concert hall stage, to perform playing as a guitarist, for example.
Right.
Well, that doesn't mean I can't play guitar. I can.
Yeah.
I can play guitar, but I wouldn't go to Purcell Room or Royal Festival Hall and play guitar there because I don't regard myself as a guitarist.
Right.
You see, so
I do.
Like even as a drummer, I can play drums in certain situations up to a point. I play drums all the time, every day. Different types of percussion. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, like, I can't play dun dun, for example. I'm not a drum player, but I've played in bata ensembles. I've done all that kind of stuff because it's just a pub experience that I have acquired. Travels as a musical director and composer and performer through the years. A lot of these things have become things that I do. I mean, one thing I don't do, I don't play any wind instruments. I don't play oil and blast instruments because sometimes people say, "Oh, can you play this clarinet as well?" I'm sorry. Can you play saxophone? No. Can you hear? Nothing that you blow. That's not really.
That's not really you. Yeah. All right. That will lead me to my next question. As because as someone of Nigerian heritage living in the UK, how has your cultural background influenced your music and creative voice?
Okay. I think it's a continuum. It's a thing of like, because I lived in Nigeria more or less in my teenage years, and I was in secondary school and university in Nigeria. And because, London, for example, let's face it, second home for Nigerians outside of Nigeria, there is that thing of people coming and going all the time. So I can say that even as far back as 30, 40 years ago, you'd get people who I knew I'd met in Nigeria or whose paths had crossed with mine, major people, music people like, say, Professor Akin Yuba, blessed memory,
Right.
people that passing through. And then you'd go to events that he was set up like as an academic, in universities, and other people, you meet other people that way. And so there was that side to it. But then, of course, the theatre work that I do as well, of all the people that have passed through, some of whom I knew from Nigeria. For example, there was a fellow called Chuck Mike, an American, who
Right.
to live in Nigeria in the late 70s and stayed there eventually for about 30 years. And I knew Chuck Mike when he was very new in Nigeria.
Right.
And then he passed through the UK to do one project, and that led to me working with him on different projects as a composer and musical director for 14 years, 15 years or more, internationally, different places. And then there's other people like, say, Peter Badage, or who you probably know
Right.
where not. Again, so all these people, different people, like, those are sort of maybe some key characters I've mentioned. Well, then there are others who are either affiliated to them or, similar, that kind of thing. Or there's a network.
Right.
And through that network, you get involved in things, or people say, oh, that person is capable of doing this thing. So Juwon is capable of composing. Juwon is capable of being a musical director for a theatrical production, or working with a dance company, or doing any of those things. And then people would recommend because they knew I could do those things. And so that was there. And then there were the musicians who were more like band musicians, who also came, because the likes of, say, Blast from the Past, say someone like Lagbaja or whatever, people like them. Lagbaja was a contemporary of mine at the university and not necessarily him, but people that might have worked with him in Nigeria would then pass through, and they would say, oh, there's this guy, Juwon Ogungbe, who, like Roger knows, or who, blah, blah, blah. Like, did you see? So, sort of fertilization in that way, just the network of Nigerian creatives that has been that way, well, from time immemorial, really. Like, because there were people there before your and my age group doing similar things, and we came along in our time, and I guess are representatives of our generation for doing that.
Very true. Very true. I mean, you had an operatic works developed with institutions like Opera North, Grimeborn Opera Festival, and the Dhow Countries Music Academy in Zanzibar.
Right.
What have these collaborations meant for your artistic evolution?
Right. Okay. Well, I'm looking at this chronologically. I want to look at it like in terms of like which one came first.
Right.
Let me see. I think Opera North, strangely, might have come before the other ones.
Right.
So what happened was a director, and of some Nigerian heritage, a director wanted to do a project at Opera North and wanted to work with a composer, and because she knew of me and my singing and that sort of thing, she put my name. She asked if she could put my name forward as a collaborator to work there, and I said fine, you can do that. And then one morning she called me and they said yes, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I wasn't expecting this. Okay, so we went there, and I had to prepare. We had to assemble a team, and I wrote the music. Got there, and they were not really providing a lot of people, so I had to I think what I'll say about working in that setting was that it was useful because, like, some of the local people there who wanted to perform at Opera North, maybe people of, black people, others who had the aspiration to be involved in things there, we were able to give them opportunities to perform there as well. And to like them bringing in parachuting singers from abroad or whatever that people often do in these companies. So, but then that same project went down pretty well, and then we took it to Grimeborn, which is a festival that happens in the Alcola Theatre. And that was like, well, it's a festival, so we're just presenting the show in the festival, and it was nice to be able to do that, because Alcola is a major fringe theatre venue in London, and by that time Dalston, where Alcola is based, had become quite a hub for a lot of things, post-Olympics and all that sort of thing. So all of that was good. And then I had my journey with King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba was kind of different.
Right.
Because I had friends from Zanzibar who used to be based in the UK. And it was like, well, you must come. And eventually I was able to sort it out to go there. And they put me in touch with, the people at the Dhow Countries Music Academy, which is the main place where a certain type of music from East Africa is supported. So that music is called Tarab. So the Tarab music, that is the main place where people would go to learn that, to develop as a Tarab artist. So musicians from Tanganyika, from the mainland, as opposed to Zanzibar, and all of that would go there too. So I went there to, you could say, like, do some research and development on my King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba piece. And while I was there, I worked with music students from the academy and with a lady who is part of a group called City and the Band. I don't know if she's still in that band now. She might be doing, I think she might have gone solo now. City Amina, but she's kind of a leading Tarab singer now. So she was my Queen of Sheba. That was, it was a nice experience because, well, Zanzibar is an enchanting place anyway, and I went there around the time of Eid, so it was all quite magical. People coming from all over, the Middle East, and go there for holiday around that time. That's just a really nice time to be there. Interesting. And then, but I couldn't really laze around. I had work to do. I was like, no, but having said that, it was still
a good place to be.
Yeah. But I'd done other international projects before that one that, when we were even more sort of instrumental, I think, in my development. Like I did a music theatre adaptation of Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare's Venice, which was presented at the Harare International Festival of Arts. It's called HIFA. It's the Harare International Festival of Arts. That was around 2012.
Right.
And that was, I would say, more of a project that's a career in London, because I had been doing that kind of work before. But maybe because there were more people, it was like the potential of like working with larger groups of people in making that sort of work. And the fact that when we did the presentation, there was a British Council involvement and this sort of thing. It was performed to a large international audience. We got a standing ovation for the first presentation, all that kind of thing. So I'll say that was, in a way, more memorable. But I never really followed through on that Merchant of Venice. It was like we just did it that one time.
That one time.
Yeah. Yes, in Harare. Yes.
Right. That's good. That's good. You remain creatively active, during the global pandemic, premiering new works in 2020. How did you stay inspired and productive during such uncertain times?
What kept me going? Well, I think it was an opportunity actually to start doing some things that were on the burner from before.
Right.
So, for example, I started like making my podcasts and doing that sort of thing, which I was not, I knew of. Someone had told me, I have a website designer who kind of does me like online marketing and all this sort of thing. And she told me about this particular tool that I could use to make podcasts. And I was keen to use it, but I didn't have the time before the pandemic. And then suddenly, like, we couldn't go out, we couldn't visit people. We could, I'd say I had an opportunity to like get to grips with that and start making my own podcast, my own idea of a podcast. Apart from that, people came to me and said, "Oh, can you do theatre online?" And so there were several online theatre projects that I did during the pandemic. But I guess that was based in just my reputation and the fact that, we found all of us were trying to find ways to keep going at that time. And some of us maybe were luckier than others, because I remember seeing musicians from around that time who had to get that, what was that allowance thing called again? The SAFE?
The follow.
No, not furlough.
Not the follow. Okay.
It was called SEISS.
Right.
It's the kind of funding you could get that was based.
Oh yeah, funding. Yeah, that was for the creatives. I can't remember. Yeah, but yes, that's true.
Yes, so that like it was based on whatever if you were self-employed. That's the SE thing came from self-employed.
Yeah.
I think it's something like self-employed income support
or something like that.
Yeah. Now, a lot of musicians I know from at that time, were dependent on that for about 2 or 3 years. I think I only took it 1 year.
Right.
And I only took it because I was suddenly uncertain. Apart from that, things were coming in. People were saying, will you do this? Will you do that? Do that? And so I had the chance to be really creative from a different perspective in a way.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
I had in inverted commas a good pandemic.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Right. Let's look at your expanding portfolio a little bit. So in addition, to your performances and your compositions, you've released several pieces of recorded music now available on Bandcamp. What inspires your music?
Sorry, there's not Bandcamp.
Oh,
I've been on Spotify and all those stuff.
hey,
We're going on all those major digital platforms. Yeah, Bandcamp is where you buy the downloads.
The downloads. Oh, I see. Right. Our viewers would like to know what inspires your music releases and how do they differ, from your stage compositions?
Well, I guess a new kind of ethos emerged as a result of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I was kind of more sort of dependent on this idea of, oh, you have a band, or whatever music I would make would have to be something that I was going to take out on the road or perform with a band or that sort of thing. Once the pandemic happened, I kind of felt, well, I can just make the music anyway. I can just make stuff, and it doesn't matter whether I perform it live on. I can just make this recording and it's available there, you know? And so once I felt liberated in that way, as I felt that I didn't have to start worrying that, oh gosh, if I write this music, then I've got to spend ages like teaching it to musicians or getting the musicians to play it or whatever it is, that I just make that music and it's there for, posterity. Then that just kind of set me free to like make a lot more projects than I had been doing before the pandemic. So I think I made probably 5 or 6 EPs since the pandemic.
Right.
And like they've been based on different things. And the Palmares Promise was all about, there was a place in Brazil, there was an enclave. They call them quilombos. They were like communities where people that were enslaved escaped from, plantations too. And they set up their own kingdoms and tried to set them up in sort of neo-African governmental systems.
Right.
So one of the largest ones was called Palmares, and it was an area with loads of palm trees. That's why it's called Palmares. Like they had a warrior king called Zumbi, who was was really sort of legendary, who actually lived, but I mean, he's legendary. And Palmares as a quilombo, as a kingdom, survived for almost a century, beating off like Portuguese, beating off all the interlopers, all the white interlopers. And they were there and they ran as a nation within Brazil. And I was attracted to the story because it turns out that the day that is identified now in Brazil for Afro-Brazilians in particular as Zumbi Day, that the day they commemorate, think of Palmares and Zumbi, is actually my birthday.
Wow. What a coincidence.
You know what I mean? So that kind of just was like, well, that's an interesting thing. Yes, an interesting coincidence, but a good sort of stimulus for me to kind of explore, elements of that story.
Right.
And to create music based on it.
Fantastic. I'm sure our viewers will like to, be indulged in the quality and power of your vocals. I've seen it, I've heard you before. Would you mind to kind of, give us a little piece of, of what you are capable of?
All right. I'll just sing a little bit of like this Spoke to You, which some people might know.
All right.
Meta meta lore meta meta lore ìkànnì ìwàásù nílẹ̀ ìkànnì ìwàásù lẹ́ni ìkànnì ìwàásù láyà mo ṣojú wẹ̀rẹ̀ mo bá láyà lọ. Mo ti lọ́mọ ogun, mo ti lọ́mọ sàn, mo ti lọ́mọ pọ́ balẹ̀ odò. Ọ̀pẹ wẹ́wẹ́ ṣekú pàpákó, iṣẹ́ nkéré ṣekú pọkùnrin. Ọ̀tẹ̀ Ìbàdàn mógun wájàlú, odídẹrẹ́ ṣekú yẹ̀yẹ́.
Wow. Well done. That's interesting. Very, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Let's continue on your creative journey. You're also an author.
Yeah.
Tell us about your book, All Road Leads to Peace. What inspired you and what message do you hope readers take away from it?
Okay, so like, again, there's this thing of like, I guess, crisscrossing in time.
Right.
There was a point when I was in America. I was working in a university in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. And while I was there, I was kind of quite isolated for ages, not much contact with a lot of people. And Richmond is, well, compared to my life in London, very sleepy. Yeah. But one of the things that I did do, because there was a sort of new age, mystical type of bookshop somewhere, and they had an event, and they had like, just new age type psychics and people like that present. And I attended and had a reading with someone, and that person said, you could write a really cool book, you could write a really cool book, and that book would be about about travel, not quite a travelogue, but about experiences in different places, different cultures, how much people share in common and how much maybe they don't, or similarities and dissimilarities or whatever in cultures, and she said, ended that bit of what she was telling me by saying all roads lead to peace. And then during the pandemic, I started doing like my podcast, and during the podcast I wrote scripts. Even now I still write the scripts for my podcasts, so it's a bit like doing a BBC sort of like presentation or something. I would write this script and then would read it, and then I would have like a short piece of music to go along with it, that's basically the format of my podcast. And then an old schoolmate, approached me and said, well, and this is kind of odd because this person, he's into like self-publishing and all that sort of thing, but he's a devout Muslim and is not into music at all. For whatever, I'm not quite sure the vagaries of that, but from his point of view, he's not into music. Anyway, he said to me that I could self-publish. That, first of all, that he found the podcast very interesting for the spoken word aspect of it. He even recommended it to his children, to his daughter, to listen for presentation skills and and that sort of thing. And then said that it gave me the idea that I could compile some of the scripts into a book. And so, because already like a lot of those episodes were about experiences in different parts of the world that my career has taken me to, Australia, Argentina, parts of Africa, whatever, and it just kind of felt there was something. It struck a chord with what that psychic had said to me in Richmond, Virginia, before, about that I could compile this book that would somehow be looking at a variety of cultures and the things that people share in common and the things that are different within their cultures too. And then I remember her saying, all roads lead to peace. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to call it All Roads Lead to Peace. And then I went through the process of editing the scripts and putting them together, and went on that road of discovery about self-publishing on Amazon and that sort of thing.
Right. Oh, very good. You've also created something truly special, for children, which is called Whisper in Your Ear, your audiobook, for bedtime stories, now on Audible. What inspired you to take this direction as well? And how have your audiences responded?
Well, you see, the interesting thing is that the same person who
Right.
spoke to me about about making the podcast episode scripts into a book, sent me some information about Audible. He didn't mention anything about bedtime stories. He just sent me the information about Audible. And I know that, well, maybe that time moment has passed now, but Audible was the thing of the moment, say, a few months ago, like last year. It was really the thing, like on YouTube, everywhere people were talking about Audible. It was advertised all the time and all of that. And I thought, well, what would I want to do on Audible that would actually be useful? And that, would be based on that. What could I do that would be useful and would be different from the podcasts that I do? Since I'm already doing something that's audio regularly, what else can I do? And, I work with young people quite a lot. And I thought there's a whole thing of like stories that acknowledge where we are at as a community. I wouldn't just say a community of people in the diaspora. I would say a community of people of African heritages in this country. So there's an African British culture that has different strands to it in a way.
Very true.
And I see it in kids all the time. Kids who are Somali, kids who might have an Ethiopian father, mother, and a Nigerian father, or and then mixed race kids and whatever. All different people. Like there's different heritages, and so these hybrids. And I thought it would be interesting to write something that really takes that into account. To write a collection of short stories that would deal with things that would be of interest, or that would somehow give them things to think about in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's where the idea came from.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you for that. Now, I know you did mention a little bit about Multiverse in your podcast, but can you, elaborate a little bit more, in order for us to explore, the range of ideas and topic, that you've actually published. So what prompted you to start, that project, and how do you select the themes, to cover each week?
Well, it's a lot of it. Well, I'll start from the last question you asked. How do I arrive at what I want to write about, or create or express? Now, it's a very spontaneous thing.
Right.
It's not like I have a list somewhere of things that I'm gonna touch upon. It's something. It could be like one thing that happens. It could be something that I feel strongly about that's topical at that moment. But then, even in its being topical as an issue, then I want to find a way to kind of make it more personal. So it's not necessarily about. It's not. I mean, like in some of the episodes, there would be things that are very specifically about maybe political events or cultural happenings or whatever it might be. But for the most part, it's me sort of going on a stream of consciousness that is inspired by those things. Yeah. And so in the beginning, when I first started doing them, it was a bit like, because every day I write a blog anyway. I get up in the morning, and for some people might regard that as kind of journaling. For me, it's not just journaling, because I write things and I put them online every day. Because I feel, I've learned this, like, it's kind of made a difference to my kind of expression as an artist, because for a very long time, there was that thing of, you've got to wait for that moment when somebody selects you and says, it's you, like the old thing, like, was it the lottery thing that when they say, it's you, and there's and so now it's your time, now it's your moment, and you are recognized or you are validated, and so what you have to, you've been chosen, you've been selected. Whereas you don't have to wait for that, I mean, that you are, if you're an expressive or sort of creative person, you can do that without being selected or chosen by anyone. You can do all that stuff and put it out there and do it because it's something you want to say. You can produce these things yourself. And so getting into that ethos, I think it has just sort of proliferated, or it has taken on several shapes and forms, including the podcasts and the blogs and the various things that I do.
Fantastic. I mean, still on that topic, but I'll bring us a little bit back home. Let's look at representation, resilience, and our community in the diaspora. What are your thoughts on representation and diversity in the classical and performing arts industries today? Have you seen a shift, in how Black and diaspora voices have been acknowledged, if any?
Well, I mean, it depends on when you start, the vantage point, or where, from which period, from when till when. I would say within the last 15 years,
Right.
there have been a lot of changes. I think especially around the time when, well, actually before that, I know there was all the Black Lives Matter stuff and all of that, but before the pandemic, before that kind of thing, there was a key moment I can think of was when the BBC and several other and some orchestras got together as a consortium, and they made a program about this orchestra that was based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, it was meant to go, wow, like the deepest, darkest Africa. There's some people.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Dedicating themselves to performing classical music, and we're going to bring them to the UK, and we're going to put them on, in major concert halls, and we're going to make a documentary about them, and that sort of thing. So that was done. Probably it was about 2016, 20. I think around that time was when it was done. I know for a fact that because they performed in the Southbank Centre. I think it was in Queen Elizabeth Hall. And I know that there's now an orchestra called Chineke. Chineke was started by a mixed race Nigerian Irish musician who is a successful classical musician, but she started that as a platform for musicians who would not normally get access to play in major orchestras, for example. And Chineke is apparently a resident orchestra at the Southbank Centre. So they get to perform on concert hall stages quite a lot. And around that same time, there was a family of the what were they called? Canna Mason. I think that's their surname. Canna Mason. I think the mum is from Sierra Leone and the dad is from Antigua, something like that. But the kids are British, obviously. Or the mum is of Sierra Leonean heritage. And they, one of them is a cellist, and he won the BBC Young Musician of the Year. And that he was then connected with Chineke and all of that as well. And then his sister is now able to play as a pianist, as a concert pianist. And other people kind of jumped on that bandwagon too. And so I think there are more, let's say that musicians of African heritage and other are more, there's a few more spaces, a few more openings for them now than there were before. Similarly, in the world of opera, we could say that there's a few black singers, a few more black singers. I mean, black singers from here as opposed to from America, who are given opportunities to sing principal roles in major opera houses like Royal Opera House or English National Opera or Welsh National Opera or wherever. All of that, it all kind of happened around the same kind of time. And then there was also this, when that Black Lives Matter thing happened, it suddenly went, pro-max, if you know what I mean. It suddenly, everybody was falling over themselves to appear like they were being responsive to that. So there was normal input for that. But then now, in this current climate, with what's going on in the USA and all of that, I don't know whether that's going to remain the same. It might be, it might not. But having said that, the point is that people know that there are musicians like that out there now. It's different to the way it was before.
Interesting. Still on the community, topic. Our umbrella organization, NACADE, is a committed promoting arts, culture, and advocacy within the Nigerian diaspora.
Yeah.
In your view, how important are initiatives like NACADE in creating space and visibility for creatives of African descent?
I think we need to keep on telling our story, not stories,
Yeah.
as much as possible, so that it gets to a point that, they're not novelties, there's nothing unusual or different about them. They're just human narratives like any other. Like, if an Irish person can come and present their story, or a person, like of Caribbean heritage can come and present their story, then Nigerians can come and present theirs, or, whatever it is. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Like, there's this person who is a self-appointed sort of critic or patron of African writers.
Right.
And he is Nigerian, and he's on Twitter. It says a lot of things on there. He's highly opinionated. And it's useful to have someone like that there, because, he's there sort of in a way banging the gong for drawing attention to the work and making people interested in it. But having said that, he has his likes and dislikes and prejudices, and sometimes in a way it's almost like you've got to live and let live. You can't impose your own filter on other people as such. But for example, he was being a bit, I remember reading something he wrote on Twitter where he was dismissive, or it felt like he was being dismissive anyway, of the man from Zanzibar who won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Right.
Abdulrazak Gurnah.
Yeah.
Okay, how many Black Africans have won the Nobel Prize for Literature? I think it's only Soyinka and this guy. Only Soyinka and Abdulrazak Gurnah. They're the only two. I mean, like, yes, like people like Nadine Gordimer, like a white South African and whatever. And what's his name? The one, what's his name? He wrote Foe. He wrote, what's his name? Coetzee, J.M. Coetzee. The white South Africans. Yes, white South Africans have won the Nobel Prize for Literature. But we're talking now about black Africans.
Black Africans.
Yeah, only Soyinka and this guy, Gurnah. And this guy, the person on Twitter was like, we've never heard of him. So what that you've never heard of? I mean, it doesn't matter. He's an African, he's a person, he's a human being, and like he's got important story to tell. After he won that prize, because I had never really read his work or even heard of him, to be honest, I went to read one of his books, and I found him to be an incredible writer, a great novelist.
That's interesting.
So coming back to your organization, I feel it's important that our narratives are being told all the time.
Yeah.
So that, and that from as many different angles as possible, so that it just becomes like, there was a time when tea was a foreign thing in this country. There was a time when shampoo was brought by Indians to this country. There was like a shampoo surgeon in the era of Victoria, apparently, brought shampoo as some kind of hair treatment. Nowadays, I mean, like, I use shampoo every day, and I put a conditioner and all those things. Yeah, they came from another part of the world, but now we take them into this everyday life. And I feel that's the role, part of the role that organizations like yours can play. It's important to keep telling all these stories so that we can have a place at the table, which in that way will also help in terms of the well-being, economic well-being of our people too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that inspiring, comment. On the back of that, what advice would you offer to young members of the Nigerian diaspora aspiring to work in the arts, especially in more traditional or underrepresented genres like opera?
I would say everybody has to follow their own sort of muse, their own journey, and do what is right for them. There's some people that are suited to being, in inverted commas, historical music performers, and that's what they are. It's like I know a network of singers of Nigerian heritage. In some cases, like maybe they're doing postgraduate studies or whatever, like in America or South Africa or these different places, and like they're singing. Some of them like men who are countertenors, which is like singing with a high voice. Like the voice of Philip Bailey, the guy from Earth, Wind and Fire, with a high voice. So, like what we call countertenor type singing, but like the historical version of that, like the classical version.
Yeah.
So there's several Nigerian countertenors out there, for example. Maybe until people write music for them, they might have to be people that are singing the music, the repertoire that is available for countertenors to sing. They have to sing that stuff because that's what they can do. But then maybe there'll be someone that will come along that will say, I find that really inspirational or inspiring, and I want to create for that. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that some of us are, all of us have our different sort of journeys and destinies and paths.
Very true.
And that is just to be kind of mindful, aware of that, and to sort of like go with whatever is suitable for you, and to be creative and artistic in that, and not sort of shackled by expectations, because there are a lot of things that the expectations of, because you are of this heritage and your name is this or whatever it is, and you look like this, that you're supposed to do this. It's like you should do what your soul what your soul wants you to do, what your soul is telling you to do, or what your soul is yearning for. Yeah.
That's very deep. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure our viewers will resonate with that. Now, as we are coming towards the end of the podcast, let's look more into, vision, legacy, and what is in future for, Juwon Ogungbe. Now, looking back at over the years, your artistic journey so far, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that I've been able to keep myself interested in what I'm doing.
Right.
That is that thing of nurturing like your creative voice, nurturing my voice as an artist, or my expression as an artist, and wanting to keep to remain true to that, because it's a gift, it's a talent, it's a whatever it is, and you can allow that to stagnate by just doing what people who want to make money out of you, for example, or people that want to somehow benefit from the fact that you have it, might pressurize you to do. Or you can say, well, there are times when I'm just going to have to turn my back on that and just remain true to the callings, or of my muse or whatever it's telling me I should do. And I think what I'm most proud of is like surviving, thriving, and keeping that going.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. So how would you describe your legacy then? Not just as a musician and a performer, but as a storyteller and a cultural advocate and mentor.
My legacy. Well, I think it's almost too early to say.
I like that. I wasn't trying to trap you, but I like that.
It's almost too early to say.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a long way to go.
I agree with you.
There's a long way to go, and I think the legacy again would still be about that thing of like renewal, about remaining sort of constantly engaged with that process of keeping things fresh and alive, and responsive. Not reactionary, but responsive to what's going on around me in that way, so that what I'm doing now is not what I was doing 5 years ago, not what I was doing 15 years ago. I remember some performers that I worked with at the Royal Shakespeare Company, for example, 20 odd years ago, saying, if you were doing one thing and you really stuck to that one thing, that maybe you would be more sort of prosperous. You'd have maybe a big house, and the cars and the whatever and all those things, that the toys basically, or the things that people talk about as outward manifestations of success. And I wonder, they say that, but I think again it depends on the person. Some people are good at doing one thing, and some people have the attributes to do several things.
Very true.
And and whatever it is, that we have to be true to who we are.
Yeah.
As
I
individuals.
agree to that. Before we conclude, Juwon, is there a message you'd like to share with our audience, especially Nigerians in the diaspora, about staying resilient and pursuing their dreams?
Well, in many cases, there are Nigerians in that diaspora that are doing that a zillion times over, and I should be looking to for advice myself. I mean, because it's true.
I know it's true.
Adebayo Ogunlesi or whatever, this kind of guy.
Yeah,
like,
true.
Owning parts of Panama Canal and
Very true.
And there's various airports,
Gatwick and various airports,
Well, who happened to go to the same school that I went to, before my time. What I would say, again, looking at people like him, he's not necessarily the kind of person that I want to be. There's nothing about his life that I particularly covet or want, but I would say that he is somebody who has made an effort. No, I don't know about making an effort. He's flexible, adaptable. I think that adaptability and flexibility and willingness to explore and learn, learning should be a lifelong process.
Very true.
All those things. I think all of that stuff is very important. And I think not just in terms of having the piece of paper, the bali or whatever. In terms of just real experiences, getting your hands, fingers dirty, whatever, and going out there, experiencing things, dealing with people, finding out if I do this, what will happen? Oh, I made a mistake there, but if I made that mistake, who knows, like 10 years later, oh yes, I remember when I did that thing, that now has some impact on the choices I make now.
I agree.
So, building that sort of vocabulary of learning, and sort of being sort of supple, flexible, adaptable, responsive, all those things, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So, Juwon, how can people connect with you or learn more about your work and the services you provide?
Right. Well, my number one port of call is my website, which is juwonogungbe.com.
Right.
I would like to encourage people to follow me on Spotify, Juwon Ogungbe on Spotify.
Right.
I would also like, let's see. So my website, Spotify, and then I'm on most of the major platforms, like as in I'm on Twitter / X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn.
And you are now on Naked as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Lastly, Juwon, what's on the horizon for Juwon Ogungbe? Are there any exciting projects or initiatives we should look forward to?
Well, I'm just about to go to the drawing board for something new now. So I think I would like it to be, I'd like it to reach a bit further down the road in terms of what it is before I say anything about it.
Right.
But one thing I am doing that I can mention is like one of the stories from Whisper in Your Ear, which was the collection of bedtime stories. I am currently writing a screenplay, which hopefully is going to be made into an Hollywood movie.
Right. Fantastic. Well done. And we're all looking forward to seeing that. Right. Juwon, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights and for your incredible contribution to advancing equality, diversity, and inclusion. Do you have any final thoughts or messages, for our audience?
I think my final thoughts are that we should remain connected and that we should support each other. We should support each other in building a space for ourselves. Expanding the space for ourselves, in terms of the consciousness of who we are and what we represent and what we're capable of and all those things. I just think that there needs to be a lot more of that, and I just hope that people will look into that. And also this thing of like trends and all of that, I would like to say that it's really good that some people have reached a point, a particular trend, the trends of now. But the trends of now will be old-fashioned in 5 years' time.
True.
We should be aiming as well to have things that stand outside of time, things that are timeless. We should aim for more timelessness in the things we produce.
Right. Very, very good. Very, very good. Thank you very much. That is deep. Well, and to our audience, don't hesitate to connect with Juwon Ogungbe to explore more of his groundbreaking work. From his performances and music releases to his writings and podcasts. Also, visit naked.org to stay connected with your Nigerian heritage and community, and to learn more about initiatives designed to support creatives and change makers in the diaspora. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, stay inspired, stay connected, and God bless.